I want to also talk about U.S.-Cuban relations, because that obviously an issue earlier this week when the embassy in Washington reopened for the first time in 50 years. Secretary of State John Kerry attending the ceremony there. I want to show you viewers what he had to say and get your response.
Change is rarely easy, especially when earlier positions have been so deeply ingrained and so profoundly felt. But although we can and must learn from the past, nothing is more futile than trying to live in the past. President Obama believes, and so do I, that our citizens benefit far more from policies that aim to shape a better future. There is, after all, nothing to be lost and much to be gained by encouraging travel between our nations, the free flow of information and ideas, the resumption of commerce, and the removal of obstacles that have made it harder for families to visit their loved ones. Make no mistake, the process of fully normalizing relations between the United States and Cuba will go on. It may be long and complex, but along the way, we are sure to encounter a bump here and there, and moments even of frustration. Patience will be required. But that is all the more reason to get started now on this journey.
Congressman, your reaction?
Look, Greta, I have shown a willingness to work with the administration on a number of issues, the environment, education initiatives, even immigration. However, on foreign policy, I just think that this administration is taking our country down a very dangerous path. This is the administration of these deeply flawed negotiations with Iran that have resulted in a deeply flawed agreement. This is the administration of the red lines in Syria, I think a low point for foreign affairs in this country. And in the case of Cuba, this is the administration that, in exchange for Alan, who was unjustly held hostage by the Cuban government, they have given the Cuban government everything that government ever wanted and then some. 3 convicted spies, one of who was convicted of conspiring to murder American citizens, removal from the list of state sponsors of terror, even though everyone knows that Cuba continues to have close ties to many of our enemies, like North Korea, like the FARC, the terrorist FARC guerrilla in Colombia. We have given them sanctions relief, full diplomatic sanctions, legitimacy on the world stage. All why? As a reward to the Cuban government for having held Alan Gross hostage for 5 years, because that's how this all started. So I think it's a major mistake. Mr. Kerry says that we can't live in the past, and I agree. We have to live in the present. And the facts today are that Cuba is led by a military dictatorship that's responsible for the death of American citizens. Okay, on February 24th, 1996, the Cuban government shot down 2 Cessnas flown by American citizens over international waters. Those young men were murdered. They were in their 20s and 30s. This is the same Cuban government that was shipping arms illegally to North Korea just a couple years ago. This is the same Cuban government that today continues to wreak havoc in our hemisphere. They've destroyed the country of Venezuela, a country that was part of the democratic community of nations and now is almost a failed state because of the Cuban government. So why does President Obama and Secretary Kerry, why do they insist on continuing to reward this government with unilateral concessions and asking for nothing in return? The Cuban government continues beating people on the streets of Havana, imprisoning dissidents. I mean, I just don't understand the logic.
You represent the 26th district in Florida. 70% of your district is Latino. How many Cuban Americans does that include? Almost all Cuban Americans. What are they telling you about these relations? Because some polls show younger Cuban Americans believe the sanctions should be lifted. The embargo is not working.
Right. About half of the Latinos in my district are Cuban Americans. And Greta, what I have found is that the more people know about the reality that is today's Cuba, the more people know about the history of U.S.-Cuba relations, the more they are opposed to what the Obama administration is doing. And look, sure, some of the polls say, well, you know, 6 in 10, 7 in 10 Americans think we should try something new. Well, when that question is asked by itself, should we try something different with regards to Cuba, if someone doesn't really know the history, doesn't know all the details, everything that's going on, they would be likely to say yes because they know it's been a long conflict. But the bottom line is that the policy that I want for the United States is a policy based on the facts today, not the fantasy land that Secretary Kerry was describing. This is an enemy of the United States, and we need to be very careful how we proceed here.
All right, let's get viewers